Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Drone Life News. Joining me as always is Editor-in-Chief of DroneLife.com, Miss Miriam McNabb. Miriam, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing good as always. Things are really building here at Drone U. Very happy to do a lot more in-person trainings. It's the fuel that feeds the fire, so very grateful for that.
Excellent.
Definitely. Well, for our first story, Miriam, it seems like one legislative body is calling for not necessarily drones, but all recreational aircraft to be quote-unquote electronically conspicuous. Does this mean that they're calling for all recreational aircraft to have some sort of ADS-B transponder? I mean, what's the point of this, and what's the story here?
Yeah, this is really interesting. It's research, actually. So it's not a legislative body. It's a research group in the UK. And they're making recommendations to the UK government on how to unlock the potential for the commercial drone industry, estimated at, 40 billion pounds or something like that. So obviously, every country realizing the economic benefit of the commercial drone industry. And what these researchers found is that there were a couple of things they felt were really critical to unlocking the potential. One was to assign a minister of drones to kind of put somebody clearly in charge of drone-related legislation. And the second was very interesting, was for the government to pay for all recreational aircraft, and I assume they mean manned aircraft, to be electronically conspicuous. So this is kind of bridging the gap that causes a problem for many UTM systems or UTM frameworks where, drones really have to be the ones responsible for identifying anything that's in the sky. They've got to be able to find any of these recreational aircraft, whether it's a lightweight glider or a small plane or whatever, even though those aircraft are not necessarily required to carry ADS-B or to be electronically conspicuous. And what this research found is that it would be well worth the government's investment to just pay for making all of those aircraft electronically conspicuous so they could be seen in an air traffic control system. And that is really critical to making the skies accessible to the commercial drone industry. So not something that I had read before in official research papers. Thought that was really interesting to bring up. It is certainly something that is discussed in the UTM community, but not necessarily something that everyone's aware of.
Yeah, very interesting. I know it would be useful for certain drone pilots when we can see aircraft coming close to us, on our tablets and whatnot. So I definitely see how that could be useful for sure. So, well, bringing us to our next piece of news, it looks like some more conferences are getting underway. And this week, it seems like energy is the vertical of focus when it comes to the drone world. So what's going on this week, Miriam?
So this week in Houston, the Energy, Drones, and Robotics show is back live. Great show, very focused, of course, on the energy sector, a big growth sector for the drone industry. So a couple of Drone Life writers are there on the scene sending me notes, which is great. Looks to me like kind of autonomy is the theme. And since we've sort of talked about autonomy before, we'll bring it up here, with Percepto, that they do autonomous drone in the box solutions. They're working a lot overseas and here in the US with agencies like Florida Power and Light, who have the appropriate waivers and so forth to enable fully autonomous drone inspections. Especially they're using them for sort of disaster preparation and disaster response. Of course, in Florida during hurricane season, that's important. And then Skydio also presented their keynote saying, autonomous inspection is really kind of the next step for the energy industry. So what do you think? What do you think on sort of what's allowed currently versus what drones are capable of doing?
Well, you bring up a really important point, and, kind of bridging the gap between last week's news show and this week's. I got the article out regarding the FCC kind of coming down on DJI, and I like how they noted that, there weren't really domestic manufacturers that could compete with DJI. And I even slipped in the little quote from Brendan Schulman's interview with Drone DJ, where he outright says there are other drone companies, now I'm paraphrasing, there are other drone companies that are advertising and marketing full autonomy, and that's currently illegal. And, reading your article on Skydio and what's going on in Houston, Mr. Dunn from Skydio says that one customer contracted with Skydio for inspection noted a 75% reduction in cost per bridge and a 92% reduction in training costs, stating that manual drones simply don't scale. But, continuing on with that analogy, that's essentially saying that drivers do not need to get educated in how to drive because they can rely on full self-driving, which we know is not true. We also know that that is illegal as well. And so with Skydio kind of coming out and saying, we can autonomize everything and we can do everything, it's nice that someone who has a lot of clout in the industry like Brendan Schulman is finally coming out and saying, like, look, when are we going to talk about the fact that full autonomy is not legal? You might be saving money and not training people, but what's the liability on the back end when you can't stop the drone from running into a child's head, which has happened? So, Miriam, I have a kind of a very powerful opinion on this. Not powerful, but just a very kind of structured, solid opinion. And until there is legislation and regulations regarding full autonomy, we still have to have a pilot on the sticks, able to avoid an emergency at any time, which does mean full control of the aircraft. So, a lot of these claims, you really just got to be like, okay, you're not Elon. Elon does a better job at presenting this, and FSD is still a problem, and autonomous drones still are not legal. So it would be nice for the FAA to come out and say something, but I think that they're not going to do that because it's political suicide right now, as politics are definitely politics are increasing, and so is the pressure on DJI, as we saw from the FCC last week. So, it's one of those things where at the end of the day, pilots need to make the decision on their own because ultimately pilots are responsible, and you need to know what drones follow FAA guidelines, because if you do get in a crash, your insurance company is going to investigate and question you as a pilot to find out if you were following FAA guidelines. So I just don't want to see any drone pilots getting caught holding the bag, Miriam.
I'm going to play devil's advocate because that's what we do here. So I think that the customer that Skydio was referencing was overseas for one thing. So in their defense, but I also think that autonomy is kind of a really interesting technology, and that there's definitely this halfway point that can happen right now. And so I have gotten in a lot of trouble for writing about my current fascination with passenger drones. And I call them passenger drones, and then everybody yells at me because they want to use something that nobody outside of the industry would ever recognize. But essentially, a lot of these designs that we're seeing now come out as crewed vehicles with the autonomy built in until such time as full autonomy, like you're over there 1,000 miles away and I'm sitting back in the office, is a reality. And I think that until that happens, in the meantime, there's definitely a halfway point where you can actually be safer to use some of these autonomy functions because, as you know, you are a skilled and experienced pilot. Not everybody is. If you're trying to get close to under a bridge, you could easily make a mistake if you're trying to steer yourself, right? So I'm hopeful that what there really is this kind of halfway point where people are there flying the drones. They are, staying within the confines of current regulations when they don't have waivers to do more than that, but that the ease of use has improved to a point where you're getting better data and it is safer flight. So I'm going to still say, okay, like crewed systems until such time as the uncrewed is available. And, who knows when that will be here in the US. What I am seeing, I guess I would call them edge use cases, and then it is overseas, is things where you have a really remote area, where you've got one of those mining sites that's been closed for 5 years, but you still have to keep maintaining surveillance for 10 years. There's nobody there. There's nothing for you to hit. If that drone crashes down, it's going to crash down in the desert, whatever. And so they are utilizing these fully autonomous, miles away in the office on this drone system for surveillance. I think that's a great use case. It should be legal. It's safer, more effective, more efficient, and we'll get there for a much broader variety of use cases at some point. So I'm going to take the middle road here. I'm a flaming moderate.
I like it. And I agree with you that there is a balance in using essentially like a pilot assist, right? And helping pilots with autonomy. But I also agree with you that full autonomy is currently not legal, but how long will it take until we get to that point of regulation, right? Couldn't agree with you more. The issue though is, how is Skydio not leaving drone pilots hanging when they're actively marketing and advertising full autonomy? And even the pilot assist and the autonomous functions on those aircraft, the pilot still is not ultimately in control. Sure, you can press a pause button, but that does not give you the controls to manipulate the control surfaces to avoid an emergency. So, for me, I just, I'm sure Skydio hates me at this point, and I honestly, I don't like that. I would like to work with them, frankly, over various issues because I think this is easily solvable. But that said, I just think that so many drone pilots are going to be left holding the bag and that this issue should be addressed. But how many times, Miriam, in the United States has the government actually caught up to technology? Typically, it's technology pushing the government to think about new ways of regulating things, new ways of ensuring a safe environment, And so I understand that Skydio is trying to push the envelope, but at the same time, we can't set up our audience, our users, our pilots, our clients to fail. We've got to be honest with them. And so that's kind of my point here. And I do see a future of full autonomy. I definitely think that future is not far away. That said, I would like to see, more ability. I would love to see a future of full autonomy, but pilots are still able to fully take over control. They are able to avoid an emergency. They are able to have full control. And so I agree with you that it's definitely we're in a middle point. I just think that marketing and hype should be honest and truthful, as so many of us get caught up in claims. That's all.
Okay, well, I haven't flown the drones, so I'm not equipped to comment on whether or not you can go in and take over at some point. But again, I'll say from a technology standpoint, I'm going to play devil's advocate. I think pushing the envelope of what can be done is always good, because the more people who want to do it, the faster we'll get there. So we'll see. We'll see. When we get more drones in the air, we will gather more data on this question.
No, and I agree with you that we've got to push the envelope. I just also think that we should, companies should be honest. That's all. But, that does kind of really steamroll us right into the next piece of drone news. Last week, we saw the FCC coming down on DJI and asking for more restrictive measures about what funds can be used to purchase those drones. Meanwhile, on the opposite end of the spectrum, Skydio is heralding their new cybersecurity expert. Miriam, what do you have?
So I actually thought this was interesting, because I do think that Skydio has read the room and said, hey, our customers are concerned about cybersecurity, and we're going to meet that concern head on by hiring a very experienced, actually great veteran of the industry with a lot of skills, that they are going to hire a head of security to meet cybersecurity fears head on. And you and I talked about this in pre-show, and I tend to be a little bit Pollyanna, like, really, who's trying to hack the drone? But I think everybody's like a nice person until proven otherwise. But, there is definitely concern, and people need to think about what their use case is. For somebody who's taking a picture of a sporting event or just a construction site or something inside or something like that, they need to think about, is this really data that it's very important to me to secure? Certainly in the energy industry, like we just talked about, that is a primary concern. If you're talking about a nuclear site, those customers really need to follow very specific protocols of data security. And so I think that that's a real concern that customers are going to have. Certainly heavy industry and energy customers are going to have concerns about data and about cybersecurity. So I thought it was really interesting that Skydio is just kind of meeting that head on and saying, let's call it like it is. We're hiring somebody to be head of cybersecurity and make sure that we are addressing potential and evolving vulnerabilities in our platforms. So.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's great that they address that, and it's nice to see Skydio taking that head on, and it should showcase some. Hopefully, if drones ever get to a point of doing BVLOS and these advanced operations, it's going to be absolutely critical to have cybersecurity as a whole.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, again, it sort of depends on the use case. But I do think that as, I've been in the business since 2013. You've been in the business since about then too, probably before that, right? And we have seen use cases evolve. We have seen things change from people just wanting to take pictures and document things to creating 3D models, to really bringing drone technology into their operational processes. And as that happens, and as those customers get bigger, and as the value gets bigger, certainly issues about data security, insurance, all of those sort of surrounding ecosystem elements become much more important.
100%. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Miriam. I think it's going to be a very bright future for the industry, especially going about it the right way and crossing our T's and dotting our I's. That is for sure. Well, Miriam, thank you again for joining me. I know by the time that this show gets published, everyone will be talking about DJI's release of the new Action 2 camera, and then we'll probably have another news show before the Mavic 3 is released in the first week of November. The real question is when is this stuff going to actually be available, as it's still impossible to get other drones from manufacturers abroad and domestically.
Sounds good. I can't wait to hear. We're still friends, right? Even though I'm playing devil's advocate.
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%. No, I know my move.
Why I like doing shows with Paul.
Well, like we have talked about off camera and in pre-show, just how important it is to look at both sides of an issue, and how important it is to be able to have conflicting conversation and look at, various perspectives that differ from your perspective. I think it's absolutely crucial. And I apologize for my mood kind of going down. It's just, I think of NTSB and what they just did with Tesla, right? They are now having a specialist in obstacle avoidance investigating Tesla's FSD. And it makes you wonder, okay, well, if the government is starting to get really serious about autonomous driving, when do we get serious about really investigating autonomous aircraft? Because it's not just important for Skydio, right? Skydio is a little blip on the map. It's important for people like Boeing, Hyundai, Airbus, right? And we're talking back to urban air mobility, like you talked about when you write about the drone carriers or urban, I forget the name you used.
Passenger drones.
Passenger drones. Yes, thank you. It's crucial. And it's about time that if we want the industry to continue to expand, that we need objective information that really looks at both sides of an issue and comes to an objective conclusion. This way, consumers don't get left hanging, and we build a safe and scalable future for all kinds of pilots. That's I think why my mood kind of came down, is I'm like, I just get frustrated because I think of the world as like a perfect world. We'll figure it all out. It'll be okay. But I'm like, figure it out. So
When do you think the first autonomous car went coast to coast in this country? Cross country, fully autonomous car.
Probably 2014.
1984.
Are you serious?
1980. Yes. Harvard prototype.
George Orwell's getting creepier and creepier.
40 years, we have not gotten it together.
Wow.
40 years the technology has existed.
So that brings up an important question, Miriam. And however you answer this, I don't have any expectation, just so we're clear. But it really begs the question, at what point should our government representatives have some sort of either A, education that's beyond a political science degree, which we all know in college was the easiest one to get, or 2, a research and investigative protocol to force any regulator, a mayor, a city council person, a congressman, a senator, to have a research protocol to do before they implement bills or investigations? Because I don't know.
Absolutely. So there needs to be some rule about bringing in expertise in the same way that there's a rule about allowing public commentary. And it's a very catch-22 thing. Like, we've had people complain bitterly about having, large drone companies and large manufacturers on the deck. But my argument on that would be, hey, do you want no doctors on the FDA? Like, come on. You have to have people who actually understand how these things are produced and what the capabilities are, and who are deep into the nitty-gritty to help inform these regulations. And unfortunately, the DAC really informs the FAA, but we need somebody to inform Congress as well. So totally agreed on all kinds of things. We're working out very tricky issues with the roles and responsibilities of social media platforms and technologies that people just didn't realize existed, that are catching us not off guard. We've been there, but they're new.
No, 100%. And in regards to your DAC comment, having that multivariate or multi-nuclei expertise, right, where you don't just load the DAC up with just manufacturers, but you've got actual drone pilots, manufacturers, companies that are doing inspections at scale. Having all of those expertise is crucial and critical. So I couldn't agree with you more. And I mean, I know you've seen it in the drone industry, but how many times do we have to go to a legislator and educate them on what is possible with the drone, the history, what's been done, And so I believe that having these protocols would really step up the intellectual integrity of our legislative body. That's just kind of how I feel.
Well, and do a lot to sort of bridge some of the consistency gaps.
Very important point.
Right? You can't if you regulate something over here, it may affect something over there, and you can't you can't require opposing opposites. So
100%. So, by the way, I said the political science degree because I had a minor in poli-sci, so I'm guilty myself.
My son wants to go into politics. Really?
No, thank you. Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, seriously. Well, a lot of complex issues here, Miriam, and I really appreciate being able to do this show with you because there is so many multivariate expertises to be able to adequately speak about these issues and then kind of tie all the dots together to realize what's really, lying below the surface. Where are we really headed? And so for that, Miriam, very grateful for you. And thank you again for another very informative and on my side, opinion-fueled news show. So.
Always a pleasure. I hope we get together for drinks sometime. That would be fun.
I still have your POG waiting in the shipping room, ready to go out. So I need to send that. But yeah. I agree.
Okay.
Thank you again, Miriam, and thank you everyone for listening in. Let us know your comments. Let us know what you think. The drone industry is definitely evolving, and there are a lot of moving parts in the regulatory body right now that will affect all of us. So it is important to stay on top of. But thanks again for joining us here at the Drone Life News Podcast. We'll see you next time.